connection, community.
Community connection.
We're part of a human web. We're meant to be tied to each other. We need each other. We talked lately about sedentarity as the new smoking, as a risk factors for many illnesses. Now we talk about isolation as a risk factors for many health issues, certainly for mental health issues. Certainly this is one of the things that was part of the pandemic era. So whatever we can do to do that, to foster that, to protect that, to stop the division and to foster on what reunite people. I mean, our world needs that right now. And I think there's a way that you can try to implement each of them in your life intentionally.
So we actually talked about these, how immigrants are more affected by social injuries, and how they are high risk at social injuries, and they can develop ultimately psychosis. But what is really important is that they can connect to other human beings, or connect through something in life that they actually can
Yes.
heal through communities. If it's not a family, that will be amazing. Sometimes it's a community in,
Yes.
it's sports, or it's a meditation group. It's a whatever it is,
Yes.
that's why I
Of
love
course.
the Joe
Yes.
Dispenza
Of
community
course,
a
yes.
lot.
We know.
So, actually, I asked this question in the beginning of the interview, but actually you never answered, but it makes sense right now.
Now, maybe,
Because
yes.
we talked about your work. You did the
Mm-hmm.
work. You studied at McGill. You went to King's College. You did the research on immigrants. And then you were working with, how do I pronounce, Inuit
Yes, the Inuit,
communities.
yes.
But then something happened to you. You became, if I may say, a patient. Do I say this right?
We could say that I became a patient. I mean, I had to go through my own health journey,
Yes.
which evolved insidiously throughout my studies. I mean, there were early manifestations, even like in my, even before I started my studies in my 18, and then it manifested through as I studied and did my doctoral studies, and often it was like dismissed as, oh, it must just be the stress of, the PhD, and it was almost normalized as if this is just what the PhD does to you. But I'm like, at some point, I'm like, actually, no, there were things that I used to be able to do and that I'm no longer able to do. There were also very strange physical symptoms that did not quite make sense. And this led, because as I was evolving in my career perspective, I was developing lots of international collaborations. I already had research funding to establish, my research lab. When going back to Canada, I had teaching roles, I had clinical roles. I was starting to give conferences, and I had lots of collaborations, from teaching, research, clinical. But some things happened at some point that I was no longer able to handle those various roles. My health issues became so prominent that I had to stop eventually nearly all those roles for some time. And there was lots of confusion at the beginning, and we didn't know what was happening. There were neurological issues that we didn't quite understand. There were very severe sleep issues. But all of this had a tremendous impact on the sense of who I am. I'm meant to do all this. I've trained to do all these research. I've trained for this career. I'm there. I'm graduating. I'm now ready to set up everything, to launch. My ideas are there. But something happens that it's like, no, life brought me to a space that I need to learn something else, and I needed to learn to take care of myself. And one of the first things, before we understood and before medicine was able to find what was going on, that was a whole journey on its own. But before I got there, that's where I encountered meditation.
Before you got there.
Yeah, I mean, meditation appeared to me at a moment where there was lots of confusion on what was going on.
So,
What are my health issues?
can you tell us the symptoms to really understand it, like in a concrete level? Like, what were the symptoms you were having? One of them you said like sleeping. There was a big issue.
Hmm,
What
hmm.
what more? What were you experiencing? What were you
Oh,
feeling?
I mean, I was experiencing lots of distress. There was some anxiety, some depression, and some distress from not being able to fulfill my roles and everything.
Mhm,
But there was also an extreme fatigue, which eventually was related to a very severe form of a sleep disorder.
mhm,
Eventually, we were able to find that there was a problem of coordination. So coordination, which manifests in a neurological sense, in the
mhm,
sense of my movements, my ability to play the piano, but also my ability to juggle with tasks and do things. Because I used to do music and medicine at the same time. And later on, I studied in psychiatry, but I would have like leadership roles and I would go back to play the piano. I was able to juggle lots of things at the same time. And it's like suddenly I lost that ability to juggle. Now there were
mhm,
lots of symptoms affecting other sphere. So there were digestive symptoms as well. There were lots of pain as well. All this was a long exploration journey, which led eventually to find the underlying syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which was underlying this, so a cognitive tissue disorder. We also found an autoimmune neurological disorder. So we eventually found some of the root causes of this.
mhm.
But of course, possibly the stress contributed to some of the manifestation or maybe accelerated some of the progression. It had an impact on that and the high expectations that I had towards myself. So in that process, that confusion, those years that I just knew I was experiencing lots of symptoms on lots of my systems, and we didn't know why. At first, we didn't know why. The answers were not clear. Even when we found I had a very severe sleep disorder, okay, we started treatment for that. But how does this explain this and that? And we would keep exploring, and the more we would keep exploring, it's like, oh, you also have a heart malformation. Oh, you also have a kidney malformation. So I would just kept being added medical diagnosis. It just kept
Mhm.
going more complex. And as it kept going more complex, it was like, okay, how can I heal this? How can I? So I had to rethink everything. I had to rethink who am I in this? And meditation was
Were you seeing a psychiatrist or a
as well,
psychotherapist?
as well.
Both
Oh,
psychiatrist and psychotherapist.
yes,
Both.
yes, yes, and a sleep specialist, and eventually an internist, and eventually a cardiologist, and eventually a gastroenterologist, and eventually a neurologist. And yes, I went
So
through.
the reason I'm asking this, so people that are listening and watching this don't think like you went through it by yourself, right?
Oh,
Um,
oh no, oh no, and Özlem, this is a key to what I might say later on. But one of the key to resilience is to actually know your own weaknesses, to accept your own vulnerability. And paradoxically, the more you know your own vulnerabilities and that you're able to seek help for that, that's what makes you stronger in the long run.
mhm.
That's a key aspect of resilience. Now I can say that now, having a few years training and background, working on my own resilience, working on my own healing journey. But at the beginning, let's say that it was more my own illness journey. After
Mhm.
I've done all those illness pathways in depth with lots of immigrants and everything, and then I go through my own. But the thing is that we cannot find a paradigm, we cannot find one clear answer, one clear solution. So yes, I'm working with a psychiatrist, but the psychiatrist is well aware that, okay, this is not the root cause. We realize that this is not just a depression. Yes, you might be depressed because of what you're going through, because of the losses, because of the grief of your roles. that sort of thing. So they were essentially accompanying me and providing me the support. And at that time, that's where I started to look elsewhere. That's what I looked into yoga, and that's where I looked into meditation. I started with mindfulness-based stress reduction, which was
Hmm.
kind of already accepted as a treatment modality,
John
especially in
Kabat-Zinn.
psychiatry. John Kabat-Zinn, it was accepted in the medical field. It was accepted in psychiatry for recurrent depression or anxiety. It was also accepted in other fields, in oncology, in chronic pain. So it made sense for me to go through that. And there were already some major insights there. Just learning that I am not my thoughts. Just learning that I can be the observer of my thoughts. So lots of thoughts were about disability, the illness, the suffering, whatever, the loss of purpose, and all those things. And you end up having those thoughts, rehearsing, and you identify with those thoughts. Well, that's where I realized that the more I identify with those thoughts, well, of course, the more depressed that would make me. But the more I was able to look back and look at them like, okay, this is like a movie. I can look at the script of the movie going on, but I don't have to be the actor of every scene of that movie. I
How
mean,
did you do that? How did you do that? It sounds super nice, but tell us, how was it? How did you do that? Especially being in that moment, being in the depression,
mm,
going
mhm.
through that. How do we disassociate from our limiting thoughts?
Mm. I really had to take care of the pillars of my own health at that stage. And the pillars of my health, the way that I would see that was sleep. It was obvious I had to take care of my sleep. I had a very severe sleep disorders. My sleep was kind of a disaster. I had to take care of that. I had to use special treatments for that, but I had to prioritize that. Now, I started to do exercise as much as I can. I had a personal trainer at some point. Now training became difficult at some point. So, okay, I tried to do yoga. Yoga had wonderful benefit. It centered me in my body as opposed to just staying in my mind. So there was that. I had to look at food, what I ate, what food helped me be well or not. And eventually we found that part of the neurological and autoimmune issues that I had were driven by gluten. So we had to find that. So I had to address that. So I had to take care of all those things. And the other fundamental part of taking care of your health is taking care of your mind and your emotions. And that's what brought me to meditation. And meditation, so first, mindfulness based stress reduction, already those major insights, learning about being aware, being in the present moment. That was a key factor to just distinguish myself from the thoughts, try to add the loving kindness part to it. And then I went into Buddhism because it's like, okay, I think I want to know more. Where does this come from? So I started to learn about Buddhism, but Buddhism as a philosophy, not as a religion, as a way of thinking. And again, what makes human beings suffer? Well, it's often our thoughts or our attachments and how we react to things that we are attached to and how we think that things are permanent. So just realizing those things helped me in my meditation practice. I furthered my meditation practice through Buddhist approach on a calm, abiding meditation. So that was an extra step. And then eventually, the pandemic came. I got into Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. At that stage, I started to realize that, okay, medicine is helpful in many ways to help me manage some of my symptoms, help me maybe reverse some of the issues that are going on, but nothing towards the healing path. It was all about, it's like I'm a fragmented person, dealing with a heart condition that I need to take care of, a kidney condition that I need to take care of, a nervous cerebellar condition. And it was all like I'm fragmented in some ways, and I have a treatment for all those fragmented part of myself. It felt like, okay, my healing is not gonna come from that. It's gonna come from elsewhere. And that's when I heard from a caring and wise therapist of mine about, well, might want to have a look at Joe Dispenza. So I started
Mhm.
to look at his books, at his teachings. I went to a first progressive retreat, and then there's the pandemic. And as the pandemic happened, I'm deemed to be vulnerable living in a big city environment by my own physicians, and I'm being recommended to move to a region. I happen to have ties to a beautiful, one of the most beautiful parts of the earth, the Magdalene Islands. I think I told you about them.
Yes.
So I
You
moved to
showed
the,
me actually when we
showed you.
talked, you were there.
Yes, I'd show you again if anyway if I had pictures close to. But yes, I mean the islands are like they're connected to my roots. You know, I'm a Bourque from the Magdalene Islands of Acadian origin. So then I go back in the context of the pandemic, but I already start to apply some of the work from Dr. Joe. You know, to go to the Magdalene Islands, it's a very long journey. It was a 13-hour drive from Montreal, then it's a 5-hour ferry. And on the ferry, I kind of decide to look back. You know, there's a ferry going forward. I look backwards and I'm like, what about if, all those health issues, those symptoms, the disability, whatever, that suffering and that, what about this is part of your past? What about this is your old self? What about you're crossing a river right now? So
The
I'm
river of
really
change.
having the river of change. I think I actually write a paper or something like this about what it's no longer going to be like. And I'm like, let's look at the islands like it's going to be a canvas where you can reinvent yourself and like start to adhere to an healthier version of yourself. So I think I wrote that paper. I think I threw that paper in the sea. I arrive on the Magdalene Islands. It's about 7 o'clock at night. A few magical things happen, but one of the first things that happens is that we are in October. It's the second wave of COVID. I decide um, randomly that the first step that I need to do is to go by the sea near my home. I go in the sea and it's sunset, so it's already beautiful. I'm on my own. I go in the water. The water is pretty cold. It's maybe around 10 or 11 degrees Celsius. I go in the water, but all I see around me is the beauty, the horizon, the sunset. I just feel unconfined as opposed to coming back from Montreal where we were confined. I feel so free, alive, and then there's a seal that literally comes in front of me and looks at me. So I feel like this seal is telling me a story. It's telling me welcome. It's telling me, hey François, you're home here. So I looked at that seal and I told them, you know what? I'm gonna come back here every day for the next 28 days, every day for the next month. And that became one of my key health strategies. I was trying to have a meditation practice. I was struggling to implement it, but I was able to implement my daily Nordic swim. And I was able to reshape the narrative. Every time I would enter the water, it's a little bit like what we learned, with Dr. Joe Dispenza when he tells us about how we need to bring the animal to the meditation and you
Hmm.
become the master of the
Stay,
animal.
stay,
Stay,
stay. Oh, I need to go to the bathroom. Stay. No, no.
stay,
Oh, itchy. Stay.
stay. Exact. Well, I've done that to my body in some ways without being aware of it by bringing it every day to the cold water. So much that at the end of the 28 days, so many of my symptoms improved. So much of the pains went away. The night sweats, the sleep improved, the mood, there were so many things, and suddenly it became easier to meditate. After the 28 days, my body didn't want to stop that process. It brought me back. It's like, hey, we're going to go back to the water. It was getting cold. It was getting windy. The water was going down to maybe, 6, 5 degrees. We were going towards winter and the ice bank. But I kept going every day. It became an anchor to my practice. So ever since then, I would say that cold exposure, and I guess that's the alarm that you suggested that I put.
Mhm.
That's where cold exposure became one of my key strategies. and of course the work with Dr. Joe Dispenza as well. So then I started to go to retreats.
And
I've
also,
been to
before
many
you
of them.
you said cold exposure and meditation with Joe Dispenza, but you also mentioned earlier sleep, nutrition, exercise. These three were
Mm,
also the very important things,
yes,
like in order kind of disassociate from your limiting thoughts. You
yes,
know, the
yes.
practice also, like, I'm not sure if you just cut gluten, because you were just mentioning
Oh
gluten
yes,
for a
oh
bit.
yeah. I had to, just when we were aware that it was contributing to a neurological conditions.
Hmm.
Now I know maybe in theory there's a way that, I don't have that restrictions in the future. But for now, as part of my recovery and healing journey, that was part of being aware of that. What is the food that my body needs? What is the type of movement that my body needs? I could not necessarily train. I didn't always have the energy, but I was able to do my daily swims every day. So going to do that cold swim every day, there was there was a reprogramming going on. Like this was
Hmm.
not compatible with someone who's vulnerable, weak, disabled, or ill. There was something else. So I was working a new version of myself anytime that I was going back in the cold water. And I think that translated into my meditation practice as
Yeah.
well. It would also bring a calm state of mind, which allowed me to progress further with the work.
So it was correlated. It wasn't
Yes,
like I do only this, this is no, it just, it had effect on each other.
yes.
So um
And then there was
what
also the keys of resilience. That's another thing, another framework that was really useful for me.
what do you
Um,
mean by that? Keys of resilience.
So, when we look, the way you can look at health, there's those foundations. Sleep is a foundation, the food you eat is the foundation, exercise, movement, and then managing your mind, your emotions. All of these are foundation. Now, the medical model will have it that we'll wait until there's a disease, disorder, and you will provide a treatment for that disorder or try to bring back. But there's another way that you can look at it. Well, you can work at bringing homeostasis, which is one of the things that we look at a lot with Joe Dispenza from a stress framework. You can also work at each of those pillars of health: your sleep, your movement, managing your mind, your food, your nutrition, and you can fuel or strengthen all of them. And I think when we look at mental health and maybe most of our health, the managing your mind, managing your stress, self regulating is probably one of the key components. So you can work that as a muscle. So, how do you do that? Well, we train to do that, with heart brain coherence. We train to do that with self regulation approaches. Of course, meditation techniques are part of them. But I like to look at resilience overall, the art of rebounding or rebouncing. And with the concept of resilience, something will affect you, destabilize you, maybe bring you down, some form of adversity. Now you can go back to where you were if you have, resiliency factors in place. But you can even bounce back beyond where you started. That's what we would call post-traumatic growth. Now, what about if we could train resilience? I think that's one of the things we can do. There's a beautiful French psychiatrist whose name is Christophe André, and he says something that kind of speaks to me about that you don't have to wait until the plane crashes to start sewing your parachute. How do you call
Hmm.
that? Your parachute, your
Parachutes. I Yes,
parachute.
it's in
Yeah,
Dutch parachutes, but I know,
parachute.
where we jump from the plane with this thing on
Yes,
you,
this thing.
and then you just kind of float in the air.
Yeah. So now that escape mechanism, you don't have to wait until being by the time you're thrown off a plane, to
Mhm.
start working at it. You can work at it from any positions. Now, what are the foundations of resilience? I think working on your health is a foundation. There's the prerequisites. You need to nourish your brain. You need to take care of your sleep, all those things. But I love I'm inspired. There was the work of Boris Cyrulnik, who is one of the French psychiatrists who look at the resilience, but also a researcher in Canada. Her name is Dr. Rachel Thibault. She's an
Hmm.
occupational therapist who did amazing work. She went through everywhere in the world working with populations that went through some of the most horrendous circumstances. We're talking about, people, amputees of war, I don't know, in Nicaragua, women with leprosy in Ethiopia, children soldiers in other African countries. I mean, she went in Aboriginal, in Inuit communities as well. And she accompanied them to try to give them a meaningful role, as well as did research to understand
Yeah.
what happens to those groups that, in spite of all expectations, manage to flourish instead of being crushed.
Hmm.
And she found some key features among those groups that she summarized through her work. And I love it. She described that under the concept of intentional activity. So intentional activity is like, what is an activity that you could do with an intention of taking care of yourself or of boosting your resilience? A
For me,
non,
for example, going for a run. If I feel like a little bit low, I'm like, I don't want to go for a run, but I'm like, hey, maybe I should just go for it. I don't want to go. Maybe I should go. And then I go. And then I'm
yes,
so happy the end of the 1 hour. I'm like, oh,
yes,
I'm so happy I went because I boosted my
exactly.
energy up. I
And do you
changed
have
my mood.
perfect? And do you have any other examples like that of what you might do?
Yeah, like, for example, that's I do dancing. I do salsa
Yeah,
dancing a lot. What I do more, I do meditation every morning in the evening. I actually what I also really do, I like yelling. Like it's sometimes like I need to just put that energy out and then I'm like
yeah,
"Ah!" and then it's just getting out or I take a hot shower. It's a really hot shower and I actually sometimes cry in the shower. It's not that I make myself cry, but it's just
yeah.
happening. And it's like kind of releasing that energy either with running, dancing,
Mm,
crying, yelling, or
yes,
taking a hot shower. um and sometimes it's calling a friend, but this is a bit tricky
yes.
because calling a friend can be, oh yes, I know it's really bad, but I also, everyone knows like which friend to call. Like sometimes I'm just like when I call my friend a friend and I like, but I don't want you to say anything, I want you to listen, is that okay? I'm just, just listen. I don't want to say he was not right or he's this or she's this, whatever, if I had a conflict with someone. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, because I'm getting into it I'm dramatizing the whole situation.
I love it because, essentially I'm asking, can you tell me on your own what might be some of the five keys or five paths to resilience that I'm about to tell you? And you've already raised a few of them.
Okay?
So now they all start by a C, in the framework that Rachel Thibault has developed. So the first C is for centration.
Centration.
Centration is about what is going to ground you or what is going to remove that excess stability that you might have. Like it might be a very rhythmical activity. For some people, it might be a cleaning activity, which is going to put some rhythm and or some order in a place where there's otherwise chaos or disorder. But it might be running, it might be jumping, it might be
Hmm.
shaking. I think I'm doing that when I go in my cold plunges because it brings me right there, here and now. So centration is one of them. Second one would be a C for contemplation. Now, contemplation is about having a moment of quiet observation, a moment of awareness, a moment of mindfulness. Of course, like what has been documented, and Dr. Thibault also reports on that. Some of the highest levels that you will see are the great meditators, like the Buddhist monks who meditate tens of thousands of hours. They develop structures, through contemplative activities, through practice of meditation. They might develop a state such that they might not even react anymore to any stressors that you will expose to
Yeah.
them.
Is it okay to I give an example and just
Yeah,
verify with you if you mean that?
sure.
So, like, I actually do that also a lot, especially before I sleep. I need to write it down, then I just get things structured then. But for example, I had this morning, I had something going on with, you know, I like being on time. I like if there we have an appointment, we are there, and things can happen that a person is not there. Sometimes then I'm worried, where's the person? But if it repeats with a person, I am just I'm turning into it turns into anger in me, like a
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
upsetness. And often I don't say something to the person, if it's a very close friend I could say it, but then I'm just like, the feeling is really like, it's almost like I really want to hit the person, like it's
Hmm.
just such a strong upsetness.
Hmm.
It's like people are not on time, or they forget an appointment, and then they are like,
Right.
oh, sorry, I forgot it or something, and then I just put everything on that appointment, like, I just arrange
Hmm.
I wake up early, I whatever I do,
Yeah.
right? And then I was sitting on my balcony, and I was thinking, what's really going on with this person? What kind of belief could this person have in order to experience actually stress and anger in a situation like that? And the experience was like, I didn't know at that time. I felt only the upsetness, but I came across a lot of transparent beliefs, like hidden shadow beliefs, which were like, I'm not valued by others.
Hmm.
There was
Hmm.
the feel, I am not enough. I'm not taken seriously.
Hmm.
I'm not important. Uh, I'm not a priority. All these feelings were actually
Hmm.
creating that upset. And
Hmm.
this was only in my mind, right? The
Hmm.
person that is
Hmm.
late or that
Yeah.
is not showing up
Yeah.
might have many other reasons.
Right.
And that's
Right.
their thing. That's their thing.
Yes.
But with the contemplation, I felt like, oh yeah, and that is like under the surface. On the surface is upsetness. You want to be
Yes.
upset. It's him. It's her. It's
Yes.
but
Yes.
in me, there's this little girl feeling bullied. She's not valued. She's
Yeah.
not enough. She's not lovable. She's not a priority. She's not taken seriously. She needs to work hard even for the appointment, not because
Yeah.
I do my preparation because I have this appointment.
That's
Anyhow.
awareness. That's the kind of thing. I mean, one of the initial meaning of meditation is being familiar with your own mind. That's a
Hmm.
good example of that. You became familiar with the mind and you were able to detach from the emotion. Of course, yeah, the emotion, it says something, but you were able to step back. Now, that's an example of contemplation. Contemplation could also just be to surround yourself with nature and to be one to connect around something beautiful that brings you in a state of contemplation with something that is
Mm.
bigger than yourself. For some
Mm.
people, it might be prayers, depending on your framework. Number three is creativity. So, human being is meant to create as a need for beauty and as a need to either create beauty or if not to appreciate beauty. Now maybe that's why I've surrounded myself, there's a plant here that tells me something. I see there's one behind you, there's my little buddy Beethoven here. He's a master of the human experience. I could do a whole interview on Beethoven and his legacy to humankind and how we can talk about residency from this guy. But anyway, we have that need for creation and we need to find that. It could be through cooking. It could be through a new way of exploring things. It could be searching for the beauty in the nature. Nature has its own ways. I mean, you know that if we insult an ecosystem, at some point the nature has a way to rebuild itself, and sometimes in a more beautiful and stronger way than what it was before it was injured. So C for creativity. And the last two C's will make sense to you. I think I've already mentioned them briefly. Actually, one of them we spoke quite a bit. So there's one C which is for contribution.
Oh, contribution.
Uh,
I was gonna say connection. I was
yes.
gonna say connection.
I was
Cons
keeping it for the last, but
contrib Contribution.
contribution. We need to have a role as a citizen. We need to have a role which might be through our work, but it doesn't have to be through our work. It might be by the smiles that you bring, by the calm that you bring, by the energy that you bring to this space, by your role within a relationship, with a friend. It can manifest in so many ways. It could even be by what you do to protect the nature. So you can contribute in many worlds by being one with this world and making something meaningful. If you assign meaning to what you're doing,
Hmm.
so there are many ways, but we need to have that sense. And many of my patients who developed psychosis, or some of my Inuit populations, you could see that this was clearly lacking
Hmm.
in their view and then sense of self. Now, with creativity, remember, just before that, when we learn from Joe Dispenza, we often talk about, being in a creative versus survival mode. So,
Yes.
if you're in survival mode, you're not in a creative mode, but intentionally putting yourself in a creative mode is kind of removing you from survival mode. Contribution gives you meaning, gives you value as a citizen and as your role on this earth as part of a
Hmm.
fellow with your fellow human beings. I think those podcasts are another example of contribution that we're bringing our shared experience, and with the hope that it can translate or it communicates to those who will hopefully benefit from it. And the last C that you rightly named is connection or
Connection.
community. Yes,
Community connection.
we're part of a human web. We're meant to be tied to each other.
Hmm.
We need each other. It is, we talked lately about sedentarity as the new smoking, as a risk factors for many illnesses. Now we talk about isolation as
Hmm.
a risk factors for many health issues, certainly for mental health issues. Certainly, this is one of the things that was part of the pandemic era. So whatever we can do to do that, to foster that, to protect that, to stop the division and to foster on what reunite people. I mean, our
Hmm.
world needs that right now. We
Yeah.
do it within the Dr. Joe Dispenza community as well. Whenever we talk about being part of the same flock, that what is common to us as human, and working together towards the same values and purposes. So all of these are what I would say the 5 C's of resilience. And I think there's a way that you can try to implement each of them in your life intentionally. So part of me living on the Magdalen Islands was also about implementing those 5 C's. I've done it in various ways. It appeared, through time, but I ended up finding myself most connected than ever within those islands, within the
Yeah.
community. Even if people aren't you bored? Aren't you isolated there? No, it's the contrary. Plus, I feel so connected with my, meditation communities and others. Same for creativity. Somehow music gradually came back to me. I'm back to music. Contemplation, of course, my meditation practice, my cold water practice, and increasingly I'm doing contribution roles. So I'm helping physicians in distress. I'm starting to do, speaking roles, podcasts, or going on the radio, trying to teach about resilience, about meditation, or about taking care of ourselves, all that sorts of
So,
things.
Francois, Dr. Bourque, I'm so grateful you're here. Like we have just now had a conversation for almost 1.5 hours. And my last question, I think we might have another interview actually, but my last question is like someone that is watching or listening this right now and that is experiencing any mental health issues or mental health struggles. If there's one thing, only one thing you could recommend without knowing the person, you might say, like, I need to see the person, I need to know. What is one thing, one simple thing that someone can do at home or a step to take towards a healing journey?
We could expand, of course, on that. But I think when I look back at my own journey, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I start to do, and I could tell you about some stories of transformation at a time, even with my the Inuit populations, that I went back and how I was changed as a therapist as well. But one of the things that I'm doing, going back either with Inuit or with my physician patients, and that I had to do with myself was something we've talked about it in the interview. It's just already to be aware that you are not your thoughts. Your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts is a product of your mind. Our
Yeah.
mind is a tool. It's not who we are. There's an essence of who we are, which is beyond our thoughts. So that would be a first key thing, just to be
Yeah.
aware of that. Now, there's a process to do that. Of course, you can learn meditation. I think one of the simple technique is just to even stop your breath or slow your breath, like the box breathing,
Mm-hmm.
four
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in, maintain 4 counts, exhale 4 counts, maintain 4 counts. So already you kind of take
Mm-hmm.
control of the autonomic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot be in a state of panic when you do that. And you have a way to step back from your thoughts. And just
Yeah.
remember that no matter how distressing they might be distressing. There will need to be other things. You might need to consult and go towards resources.
Mm-hmm.
But being aware of that, just stepping in the present, in the here, now. Of course, we could
So,
extend the
yeah,
conversation,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that would be my first one.
Be aware of that you are not your thoughts and breathe.
Yes,
And I also want to mention here, even though I am sitting now here with Dr. François Bourque, which is a psychiatrist, this is not a psychotherapy session. This is
no,
only for educational purposes, and we are having a
yes,
conversation. So, just to mention that as a disclaimer, this is not a psychotherapy session. It's only for educational purposes.
yes.
Dr. Bourque, Francois, my friend, merci, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I am sure people that are watching, listening here, they have enjoyed it and they have learned hopefully a lot of things that they can take it back to their journey. So I'm very grateful that you are here. Thank you very much.
Merci, Yerzlem. It was such a pleasure to speak with you again. And yes, I hope we'll have other opportunities to discuss again.